So today, we want to talk about something, just the title of it is What If? What if? And begin kind of dreaming and thinking about a preferred future. And there's a children's author that he's no longer with us, but Shel Silverstein, that he wrote books and had poems and songs, and it was just a very creative individual. But he had a poem actually titled What If? And so I want to read it to you. If you are following with us on the YouVersion app, all of this is in the notes, and you can grab that if you got YouVersion, the Bible app. Then there's a live event from here, and all the notes from today are in the app as well. But there's the poem by Shel Silverstein, What If? It says this, and it's okay to laugh. I know it's for children, but maybe it will apply to your life as well. It said, last night while I lay thinking here, some what ifs crawled inside my ear and pranced and partied all night long and sang their same old what if song. What if I'm dumb in school? What if they've closed the swimming pool? What if I get beat up? What if there's poison in my cup? What if I start to cry? What if I get sick and die? What if I flunk that test? What if green hair grows on my chest? What if nobody likes me? What if a bolt of lightning strikes me? What if I don't grow taller? What if my head starts getting smaller? What if the fish won't bite? What if the wind tears up my kite? What if they start a war? What if my parents get divorced? What if the bus is late? What if my teeth don't grow in straight? What if I tear my pants? What if I never learn to dance? What if everything seems well and then the nighttime what ifs strike again? Now, I don't know about you, if you've ever had those moments at night when you're laying there in the stillness, the quiet, and the dark, and you begin to dream or think about these what ifs and what ifs. What if this happens? What if this takes place? So that poem had a pretty wide range, but I bet there was something in the poem that made you go, yeah, I've done that. That could have actually been last night. You could have been there last night and had that thought. Well, you know, I've told the room before that Ashley and I got married. My wife Ashley and I got married while we were in school, in college, and then after my sophomore year, we got married. And then after we graduated, what we would say is our first church, the one that we went to first, was in Alabama. And I honestly, just trying to be transparent with you, it is not one of those things when you hear about pastors telling you, you know, we prayed to God and we sensed God's calling in our life to attend or to go and to serve there. I would love to tell you, Ashley and I prayed about it, but we didn't. I'm being honest with you. It was an opportunity. Moving in Kansas for school was really hard on Ashley, and I thought being a good husband, I was going to take her home and give her a chance. They don't sell grits in Kansas. And so it was an opportunity to get her to Alabama and to be around her people. And so when that pastor called and said, do you guys want to come to Tuscaloosa? I was like, we're in. And we went. It was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. But we did it. So I'm being honest with you. I was very young and dumb. But we get there, and we're going to serve, and we're going to do this. And we're on our way. And so we literally was just a few weeks away from graduation. We had already had our truck ready. We were going to load the U-Haul, and we were going to take off on the day of graduation. By that night, we would have been on the road. That was our plan. Well, about 3 days before graduation, we get a call from the pastor, and he says, listen, we've had some financial setbacks here at the church this summer. And one of the things, or this spring, and so the parsonage. And if you don't know what a parsonage is, back in the day, what would happen in church world is they would buy a house, and the house would belong to the church, and then the pastor could come and live in the house as part of his pay for coming. Now, it was kind of a double side here thing. It was really good because let's just say you bring a guy in to work for you as a pastor, and you don't like him. Well, you don't have to wait for him to sell his house to leave. You just say, go. And it worked good for him, too, because if he didn't like you, he was like, well, I don't have to sell a house. Let's get out of here. And to cover a night, boom. So everybody won. But now we make them buy houses, so everybody's stuck. So, but back then they had this parsonage. And they said, listen, we've hit these financial difficulties. And I don't know any other way to tell you this, but just to come out and say it, we sold the parsonage. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? He goes, well, we have a place for you. It's not ideal. Now, just if you're taking notes at home, anytime when someone says it's not ideal, it's not good. And he said, it's not ideal, but it'll work. And okay, sounds great, we're in. And so what they didn't tell us that we soon really picked up on is this place was about 45 minutes outside of town. And it was quite the distance. And when I say that it was in the middle of nowhere, that's really not true. What it is you would go to the middle of nowhere and then turn right and go about 10 more minutes, about 4/10 of a mile down the road. And it was a dirt road, and you were way out in the woods, and that's where we lived. And this little trailer, it sat on top of the hill, and there was wildlife like tigers and bears and stuff. And we were out there, and it was small. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that it was so small that the only bedroom there, that when I stood with my hands out, I could touch both walls. Now, going to Alabama didn't seem like such a great idea at this point. And when we took the closet doors off to get the full-size bed in there, because there was not room to open the doors with the full-size bed in there, and we were there one night, and we began dreaming about our current reality and talking about our preferred future and what we wanted to do and the things that needed to happen in our lives and decisions we needed to make and what we wanted to accomplish and things like that, like these what ifs and conversations of someday. I don't know if you've ever had those conversations with a loved one, but there's the what if and then someday meetings that we have. And truthfully, if I'm telling you as long as I'm standing here, there was a service pole in the middle of this yard that had a very bright light that lit up the whole trailer. And I'm not kidding you, could read the newspaper at midnight in our front room because of that light. And so we shut everything that had lights, you know, your microwave, your stove, we put electrical black tape across them so they would not light up the house because there was already so much light. And we were laying in bed talking and dreaming and what if and someday. And as we laid there, I'm telling you, one of us said, you know, if that light would ever go out, we could not find our way out of this trailer. And we kind of laughed about it and continued our conversation. And we heard zzz, total darkness. I couldn't even find me. I mean, as I stumbled in and out and down the floor and rolled, we're laughing. And we can't find a light, and this is just nothing. It was bad. And as we did this, I began to think about it, that there's, for many of us, when we start talking about the what ifs, and we start talking about the someday conversation, that the darkness, the fear of the unknown sometimes is paralyzing to us. Those preferred futures are hard, but when we decide where we are currently may not be terrible, but to get to where we want to be in the desired future is really hard. And sometimes it's just scary. When we start listing all of the what ifs, it's really hard to get there. It's really hard to really think about those things. You know, and there are just moments that we wonder, what if? What if? So when we think about that for the church, I wonder if we start to dream about, or we start saying, you know, someday the church will be. Or what if the church? And when we talk about the church, we're not talking about a building. We're talking about this collection of community that we are. About a year or so ago, I started having lunch with a gentleman in the community that we've become friends, and we spend some time together, and we met through a mutual acquaintance. And we started having this conversation, and when we got together, and I didn't know very much about them. I knew they were here in town, and they're here, and not in church today or attend here. And we started having these conversations, and I was just intrigued. And so I would start having these lunch meetings. Every so often, we'd get together and begin sharing about life and hearing the story and trying to find out how this connection would happen. And he kind of began unveiling more of his story. And he said, you know, a number of years ago, I was heavily involved in the church. And I said, really? He said, the church I attended, yeah, I was on the board, and I was a leader, and I used to teach classes, and I used to lead groups, and we did this, and we did that. And I said, well, you know, what happened? He said, you know, I just came to the conclusion that it was all phooey, just hogwash. And I was like, really? I mean, how did you, and he's a smart guy, and The science doesn't back it up, and I can't prove it, I can't see it, I can't touch it, I can't feel it. So we start having this conversation, and I'm thinking, then why are you wanting to have lunch with me? I mean, you're not going to convert me, and I'm in on this, and where I believe in my faith, and the way you're sounding, you don't really are up to any discussion. You're kind of laying that framework of here's who I am. And he was like, I'm not meeting with you for you to convert me. And I know that I'm not going to convert you. He said, I wanted us to build a little bit of a relationship with, to talk. I said, okay, well, where are we at? And he said, well, for the last number of years since we left the church, he said, I got to be honest, I'm lonely. I said, you're lonely? He said, yeah, we were in life groups, and we were in these groups, and my family, we did this and we did that, but ever since we denounced the church, he said, we realized that we're just lonely. He said, I wanted to ask you, he said, if I promise to not try to convert anybody, he said, could I be in one of your life groups at the church? He said, I need some relationships. And I said, well, let's keep talking about that, because, you're kind of oozing that, our life groups are based around, a study of a book and the Bible and going deeper in your faith, and you're kind of contrary to that. He goes, well, do you have any groups that just hang out? No, that's called the why, but anyway. So we started having these conversations, and that's where we were, but it's really kind of been beating into my brain that, we're part of this inside of us, the way we're wired, the way we're made, the way we were handcrafted. We desire community. We crave intimacy with people. We want to live our lives with people. And no matter what anybody says, if they tell you they're not, that they just want to be alone, it's not true. Because deep down, we need it. And, for many of us, it's really easy. We can define poverty as a financial situation. We can believe that, and we respond well to that. We respond to that. But finances are only partially related to poverty. In fact, in this same vein, sociologists would state that there are at least 3 different forms of poverty. The first one is material poverty, that the lack of basic needs, or a spiritual poverty, the lack of eternal meaning, or the third one, relational poverty, the lack of intimate relationships. And so this material poverty kind of is this thing that we respond easy to. It's easy for us to identify that we can see somebody. It is rare that when we go to Chicago and we see somebody on the sidewalk with a cup, is it empty? Because here in the States, we respond when we see somebody in need, especially when it's deemed to be financial or materialistic. It's easy for us to drop a few coins, or maybe take the leftovers from the restaurant you ate at and hand that over. That's not a problem. We do that. We respond well to that. We can make some pretty snap judgments about someone's financial position pretty easy. We got this firm grasp on it and how to identify a material poverty. In fact, I believe there are some of us, though, that are fakers and posers. That we have some financial poverty in our own life because we have overcommitted ourselves to try to live at a certain level to trick people into thinking we are more than we are. But financial poverty is real, and it's there. And we are very compassionate. We see people in financial need. We like to respond. It's an instant gratification for us. We feel good when we do it. So we identify it and we respond. Not bad. But there's more to it than that. There's more to it than just responding to material poverty, because it can happen in many different ways. It happens, but it's all going to come back. All of these poverties are going to come back into a relation. And there's a story about David in the Old Testament where he's literally on the run for his life. He has lost everything. He has gone from a decent, wealthy family to being the shepherd, to being a soldier, and from being a soldier to a hero, and from a hero to being transient. It's amazing. It's this story that many of us, when we think of David, we think of the story of David and Goliath, and then we go in and we think about King David. But there's a whole lot of chapters in between there that takes place in his life that the king, Saul, is wanting him dead because he feels threatened by him. His best friend has told him, Jonathan says, you got to get out of here. You got to run. My dad's going to kill you. His wife has said, it's not going to work. You got to run. you're going to die. He has lost it all. He has no material possessions to his name. He goes to his priest and kind of somewhat confesses and somewhat lies to him, and the priest says, Dave, you got to run. He is so hung up and hurt and down and out at this point in his life that he runs all the way to Gath. And now Gath may not seem like a big deal, but they had a soldier that was kind of famous. His name was Goliath. He was a Philistine. And Goliath was the man that David had slung. He actually cut his head off. And he was so scared and so out of whack that he goes and pretends to be crazy. He is down and out. He's got nothing. And read what happens in 1 Samuel 22, verse 1. It says, David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress, in debt, or discontented gathered around him and became their commander. About 400 men were with him. Now, a cave does not equal a palace by any means. But there's something kind of unbelievable that takes place, that when David is on the run and he has nothing, and when he comes to this conclusion and appears broken and goes before God, he ends up in a cave hiding out, and others join him. It says about 400. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but if you go to Psalm 57, you can see, it'll be up on the screens, it's also on the app, is this psalm that David writes from this cave, where he begins and he ends with this last section of this whole chapter. He says, I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the people, for great is your love, reaching to the heaven. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Now, that doesn't sound like somebody that's down and out. No matter what the financial situation was in his life, this sounds like somebody had figured it out, because he needed people. He needed that community. I mean, however and whatever doesn't really matter, because David realized that he needed these people in his life. And for those of us that have suffered financially, and maybe you felt like, because poverty gets struck by a line, right? If you're below the poverty line, this is what you make, and this is what you can afford, this is what you can do. And then we know anybody above it must be better off. That's not necessarily true. There are a lot of wealthy people that are unbelievably alone. But for some of us that are behind that line, and we begin to think that because I don't have enough material things, then I have no value, we become embarrassed and ashamed and angry. We begin to isolate ourselves from others because we believe we have nothing to add to the community. But we read in 1 Samuel where David said those that were in debt, those that were disconnected, and those that were hurting showed up. And all of a sudden, we've got community. And all of a sudden, we got a family. There's some real power in that. Joseph Schumann says this. He says, the church is not meant to be a loosely bound association of functional lone rangers. That's good. He says, Paul confronts that type of thinking when he writes, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ in Galatians 6:2. He says, the church is meant to be a refuge for those suffering. When a member is hurting, the church applies the bandages. When a member is down, the church encourages. When a member is in need, the church comes alongside to help. So what if? What if? What if the church, what if we really begin to see people in terms of the need? What if we really begin to see people where they're at? I mean, what if? What if that was our church? I mean, that second one was spiritual poverty. And when I first wrote that, I'm thinking, that is just an odd statement to say. I mean, how could we be so spiritually poor in the most religious, free country in the world? I mean, it's really easy to identify material poverty. It's really understand the finance side of that. We get that. But spiritual poverty is a different animal altogether. I mean, how do we identify somebody that is spiritually poor? How do we identify that? I mean, we don't have a meter when you come in and goes, today they get 4 stars. Today, no stars for you. I mean, how do we rank or do this? I mean, the materially poor, easy, and the spiritually poor, that's hard. Well, I think for some of us that our spiritual life is measured because we created a transactional relationship with God. We go to God and say, if you do A, B, and C, I'll do X, Y, and Z. It's all transactional. Okay, God, I'm really busy this week, but I'm going to show up on Sunday. Now, you got to do something because I need some prayers answered. If I read the Bible 10 days in a row, then God, I need you to show up because I'm on a schedule. See, what we're talking about in this spiritual poverty is not transactional, but transformational. That's when we hear the truth and we allow it, and we just don't agree with it. There's many of us that agree with truth, but we don't allow it to change us from the inside out. So when it's beyond transactional, where, ABC equals XYZ, it becomes transformational. It says, oh, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to allow it to penetrate into the very soul and core of who I am, and I will make changes, behavioral changes to what I do, what I say, and I begin to change my thought process. It moves beyond just believing it into living it. Hebrews 10, 24 through 25 says this, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see in the day approaching. I mean, we don't need to give up this meeting together. I mean, so here's the thing. This is the SJE version for a minute, all right? Church, don't throw anything. Church isn't about spiritually being fed. What we do on Sunday is not about us being spiritually fed. Now, time out. Don't get angry. That happens. When we're singing and worshiping and we're engaging, yes. When we hear some truth and we're going deeper and learning about the character of God, yes, that happens. But the church is more than that. When we gather, it's this transformational thing that takes place. Because if we stop and just think about it for a minute, if my whole goal of Sunday morning is about being fed spiritually, I could do that much easier without you. You could do it much easier without me. I could sit on my back porch. I could go to the beach. I could grab my computer or my phone, and I could download the very best music in the world of the style that I like, the gender of the musicians and singers that I want, and I could turn it to the volume that I want. I could also download the very best speakers in the world to talk about the things that I really want to hear about and that agree with me. I could download that. I could have that. I could do that all in the comfort of my shorts, my flip-flops, and a tank top and sunglasses, and I don't have to bathe. I could just sit out there and I could suck it all in and get done in an hour, 30 minutes, or 2 days, whatever I want, and I would be pretty fed if that's all it's about. Now, because there's a chance you've heard us say things that you've thought, that message was he off today? Maybe. Was Chris a little flat earlier? The drummer, he didn't have enough hair. There's a glare from the light, and it is annoying. So maybe I could just download it, because if it's about the nuggets of spiritual volume that I can take in and knowledge, then here could be disappointing because we're flawed. The Evanses are messed up. There's stuff in us that's just not right at times. We say stuff and I'm thinking, I'm saying it, and I'm thinking, that was stupid. So, but what is valuable then in spiritual poverty is that when we're together, we make each other better. When we're together, it's the community of what we do. Because when I'm not here, when I choose to not be here, I cheat you. And when you choose to not be here, you cheat me. Because when we're in this thing together, living our lives, there's something magical that takes place because the church is about community. It's about doing this life together. I mean, the spiritual poverty is not about the lack of biblical knowledge. It's about the absence of living in community. It's the absence of living in community. It's the absence of you and me doing this together. I mean, because when we live in community, then we encourage each other. We validate each other. We bring harmony. We add accountability. We do this together. And that's what I need. I need that. I need Keith White coming to me and saying, you got to sharpen this up. I need that in my life. He needs me going to him and saying, Keith, you can't say that. We need each other to go back and forth. You and I, we need each other. Not because of what I bring to the table financially, not because of what you bring to the table financially, but it's what we bring together and whole. It's just what we do. I mean, there's these stories, and we're not going to read the passage, but when Saul was converted to Paul and he goes before the disciples, they didn't believe him. They ran from him. I mean, he had been murdering people in the streets. And Barnabas comes alongside him and he says, hey, I could validate his witness because it was transformational. It wasn't transactional. He was transformed from the inside out. And we witnessed this. And he encouraged Paul to keep going. He validated him before the others. He brought harmony to the group and accountability that his creed and his deed was in alignment. I mean, this is what we do. And we long. I mean, what if? What if the church really understood? What if the church really grabbed the fact that we're to do this together? That's why. That is why we beg, borrow, and yell and scream about get into a group. That's why that tonight our women are going to gather. There's about 85, 90 women are going to come in here and be a part of this. It's not because they need something else to do. You're overcommitted and busy now. It's not that you need more Bible knowledge. I can get that on my own. It's because we need community. We need it. That's why our men are going to meet on Saturday morning. It's not because they need more knowledge. It's not because they don't have enough to do. It's because we're meeting early so you got the rest of the day to go do it. It's what we do. It's why we ask you to be in groups. Not because we need more scheduling. You're overcommitted. You're overscheduled. You've got enough to do. It's important because you do it together. When it talks about iron sharpens iron, that's what we need. That third one was relational poverty. It says in the ARP survey taken last year, 35% of American adults older than 45 are chronically lonely. That would mean there's a large number of us in the room today that came in here feeling alone. And what if the church, what if the church could be part of a solution that defeats the tragedy of loneliness? As Paul writes in his closing letter to the church in Thessalonica, he says this in chapter 5, verse 13. Get along among yourselves. And this is how the message. Each of you doing your part. Our counsel is that you warn the freeloaders to get a move on, gently encourage the stragglers, and reach out to the exhausted, pulling them to their feet. Be patient with each person, attentive to individual needs, and be careful that when you get on each other's nerves, you don't snap at each other. Look at the best in each other, and always do your best to bring it out. Be cheerful no matter what. Pray all the time. Thank God no matter what happens. This is the way God wants you who belong to Christ Jesus to live. Don't suppress the Spirit and don't stifle those who have a word from the Master. And on the other hand, don't be gullible. Check out everything and keep only what is good. Throw out anything tainted with evil. I love this line from Deborah Folletta. She says, what if our loneliness is the result of not simply of needing a partner, but of needing people? We are made in the image of a relational God. It makes sense that we possess the desire to be together. We desire to be together. There are so many of us that we belong to a lot of different groups. I am more convinced today than ever. There are some of you that are going to go run today, not because you like running, but because you've been accepted by a community of people that run. There are people this summer that went out and bought motorcycles. They are scared out of their mind to ride that motorcycle, but they've been accepted by a group of people that dress like them, walk like them, and ride like them because they belong. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. Nothing wrong with those things. But it's because the church has relinquished its role of community, and others have picked it up and run with it. And when the church stops diving into community, you and I crave it so deeply, we will find it somewhere else. We will find it somewhere else. Because deep down, we desire to be together. And Neil T. Anderson said this: aloneness can lead to loneliness. God's preventative for loneliness is intimacy, meaningful, open, sharing relationships with one another. In Christ, we have the capacity for the fulfilling of sense of belonging, which comes from intimate fellowship with God and with other believers. And with other believers. So, this thing that we plea on this and we drive on this, but what if we defeated loneliness by living in reality? That we admit our incompleteness before God and we humbly confess who we are. And then we say that we're in this broken together. I don't have to get dressed up. I don't have to put on my makeup. I don't have to put on fancy shoes. That I can come before you just as I am in a circle of room of this people and say, yeah, we're in this together. Hurting, messed up, afflicted, damaged, hurt. There are people that have said things that have hurt us. There have been people that have done things that have hurt our feelings, and we acknowledge it, but we come clean before God and we make a path for community. Because if we never humbly go before Him, it is hard. It is hard to accept others that are in the same shape you and I are in. It's hard to accept it. We don't want you to merely feel better about ourselves. We want to go and do something about it. We want to do something about it. So today, what if? What if we really became a church? What if we really became a church that said, I want to validate who you are. I want to bear witness to your transformation. I want to bring harmony to the community. I mean, what if I said, I need you to hold me accountable, and I want to hold you accountable. I mean, what if? What if? Because where we've been has been good, but there's a preferred future that's even better. Where we've been, not bad, but where we can go is unbelievable. Where we can go can be unreal.